come on. Yeah. Break down, come on.
Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of 30 Minutes of Life, the show where we take about 30 minutes to talk about what's going on in our lives and the world around us. I am Ryan Anderson, and joining me to my left is...
Brad Learman.
Hey, buddy, what's up?
Little stressful.
Oh, why stressful?
I found out I have a lot of repairs to make in my car, which might not be worth it.
Okay.
So I might have to get a new car.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Did you have any, like, on-the-road accidents, or just as, like, a faulty part kind of thing?
I took it in for an oil change, and I told them that I heard some squeaking on, like, my back left brake.
Oh.
And they said the calipers were worn out on it.
Well, that
but
sucks.
Being a kind of like a typical repair shop,
yeah,
they kind of said we need to overhaul the whole back brake system.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, so I kind of turned them down because it was like $800 to do that.
Well, I mean, it's not as bad as Amanda's. I don't mind bringing up a little thing that's been going on here at the house, but she's been seeing her check engine light. We try to use transmission to get things going, and I told her, like, anytime your check engine light comes on, it's not to say that you shouldn't care about it. You definitely should, but it's not always like my transmission is gonna blow on me or anything like that. So I went,
Yep.
I did the little, portable scanner. It checked out that it was just like the seal on her gas cap was triggering it this time. So I told her just tighten it a little bit, and she's not here in the studio right now, but she's off having a good time. And she just texted me right before we started recording saying, it's fine. The light went off. I was like, yep, I told you it was just the gas cap. It's a weird thing. It happens. Because that's the thing with a lot of the new cars is they trigger off this thing or that thing just because the sensor is slightly off. Like, I had a overheated engine thing because one of the pieces, I think, in my grill was hanging just slightly, and I think it was close enough to the sensor where it triggered the heat sensor, and then it made it seem like the car was overheating when it was at the same level that it should be at all times. So, yeah, cars are a tricky thing. But unfortunately, we've got a little bit more devastating news that happened just recently, and that's what this week's episode is. It's 30 Minutes of Life, narrowly escaping death and, close calls that we've had. So for those of you who do or do not know, there was the Gilroy Garlic Fest shooting, and it was the same weekend that my girlfriend's parents came out to see us. It just happened to be that we were having a good time over the weekend and, just hopping around to every which place from Carmel to Monterey to Gilroy. And they said, hey, let's go and check out all the cool things that are in your area while we're here. So we go out, we go have a good time. And as we're popping around to all these different places, doing the sightseeing, touristy kind of stuff, we make it to Gilroy. But the interesting thing was we had discussed I want to say the Friday of that same week, that we were going to change it up, because originally we were going to spend the whole day in Gilroy on Sunday, which was unfortunately when the shootings happened. What we decided to do, which weirdly enough just came to me out of nowhere, I was just like, hey guys, maybe we don't spend so much time in Gilroy. Let's try and make Santa Cruz our big Sunday day, because that'll be a good day for the beach. So I don't know if that was like divine intervention or what you all believe when it comes to all that stuff, but it just came to me out of nowhere and we stuck with it. So we did avoid spending the whole day at Gilroy's Garlic Fest. So I don't know if it's one of those weird, like, Final Destination kind of moments where it's just like you make a choice and something happens differently than you'd expect it to. But we were there all day Saturday, beautiful fest. And honestly, if you guys have heard about the the shooting that happened, the whole thing is truly sad, because it's been a symptom that's been coursing through America for far too long, in my opinion. There's endless debates about, like, gun control and how we should handle it and all this stuff. I'm to the point where I want it gone. I just don't want to deal with guns, but we can talk about that in a little bit. As far as what actually happened, though, it was a really sad state of affairs because I met and got to know a lot of people while we were there. And this is our second or maybe even third time now since we moved here that we've been a part of this festival, just chatting up people. I was even handing out business cards about the show. I was like, hey, if you like podcasts, here you go. And the truly sad thing was being just hours of time away from where that all happened, because that Sunday we were talking about going back there and spending like a whole day there because, it's a lot less of a drive than going to Santa Cruz. But we did the partial day down here and then we went up there. So we were up in Santa Cruz at that point, and then we find out, boom, 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 all that happens as we're sitting down to have a nice dinner, and everyone is texting me, calling. They're like, weren't you just there? How did it all go? I'm like, we're out of that area. Like, that area was already crazy enough. We didn't want to spend a whole second day there. So everyone was relieved to hear that. And I appreciate so many people, Facebook or texting, that reached out to us because, we were shaken just hearing the news. Imagine just being there. So, I mean, that's really just what I wanted to bring up. Obviously, yes, I am fine. We would have talked about this even sooner, but we had to get going again up to Seattle, which I'm sure we'll bring that up on another episode. But, man, it's just so crazy to think that you're near something that could be so life altering like that. I mean, I was shaken up and I wasn't even physically there. I mean, how would that be for you? Have you ever experienced anything like that in your life, Brad?
Not as terrifying as like a Gilroy shooting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I would say probably when I was 16, and I was going through an intersection, and I actually got T-boned.
Ooh, ow.
Yeah. And it was kind of lucky because had it happened on the driver's side, I could have got pretty messed up.
Yeah, totally. So what happened to the other person who was on that side?
No, I was driving by myself.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was in the car alone.
Yeah. So did you walk away unscathed, or what? I mean, how serious did it affect you?
I would say, if anything, my hip was a little sore for like a week or so.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything too serious.
Right.
Coupled with like a little bit of whiplash. Like, I didn't hit my steering wheel or side of the bracing on the side of my car or anything.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, that's still something. I mean, honestly, if let's just say, you were drunk and someone was driving you home in that situation, and then you were in the passenger seat, I could not be talking to you right now. And that's, I mean, that's a scary thing for me to even think about, let alone I'm sure you carry that with you all the time. Yeah, it's such a weird thing to know that life is so, snap of the finger, and then it's finite, and it all comes down to that one kind of weird decision that we make in our lives. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this. And I think, as I mentioned, talking about stuff on our show, it's kind of also cathartic for me because I've been kind of holding this in a little bit. Like, I've been doing the little tweeting on my, Ryan's Ramblings Twitter account, like #Gilroy Strong, because I drove by the hospital on my way to work these last couple days, where I've seen the banners and everything like that. And I was even there by the news action because I was doing my job, which was also in Gilroy, and just all the news trucks everywhere, like even days and days afterwards. I mean, I can't tell you that night how long we spent in front of the TV just thinking about, the second person that was apparently like at large. I don't know if he still technically is, but man, we were going over that thing. Like, if you've ever seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where they do the Charlie gets a little conspiracy crazy and he starts putting up all the Post-its on the board and all that stuff. Like, we were doing that. Like, he came in from this way, and like, obviously I don't want to make jokes about it, of course, and that would be a really insensitive thing for anyone to make light of this situation. But it's just one of those things that I can't not think about it on a regular basis because it felt so close to me. And maybe it's because I've recently experienced, people in my life pass away and stuff like that. Like, it's just one of those things that you kind of just take with you the closer to home that it hits you. I mean, obviously there have been other times too, like when I was younger, we're stupid kids and stuff like that. And, I was like going around like this campfire with a bunch of kids, and we were all goofing off because we're all really young, and someone decides to like push me, but thankfully someone came out of the way and then grabbed me, because one of two things could have happened. I was also carrying like a plastic knife or whatever, and I was also around that fire. So either way, had I been pushed and not been caught, I could have been either cut severely because I was a stupid kid, or I could have fell into a fire, which, I mean, that's already, what I did was stupid enough. The fact that someone came in and kind of intervened is just another weird saving grace that's happened in my life. And I genuinely appreciate the fact that there are better people than me that are there to look out for me. I mean, what other things have ever happened to you?
Oh, when I think I was like maybe 4. We were visiting family up north in Wisconsin, like
Okay.
Eagle River, Rhinelander area.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And one of my relatives had a cottage on a lake. And if you remember, like, it's like these little cutout of kids fishing.
Yeah.
That was kind of like on the end of the pier.
Sure. Yeah.
So, being a 4-year-old, I was kind of curious as to what was on the other side.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that it was planted on the edge of the pier.
Right.
So when I went to the other side, it just fell right in the water.
And then you came out okay, or obviously what happened?
I don't think I was at an age where I could swim all that well.
Oh no.
So had my dad not been there,
Yeah.
and kept a close eye, it could have got pretty serious pretty fast.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, your dad came in and made the save.
Yes.
If I'm thinking about it, because when I, the campfire and all that stuff, I think that was my dad who came in and made the save, but it could have been like some camp counselor or something like that. Because basically what it was is we did Pioneers, which was the little Christian kids equivalent of like the Boy Scouts essentially. So, just because we're little Christian kids didn't mean we didn't do a lot of stupid things, because we sure did. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just luck, or it's timing, or it's God or fate or whatever it is. But these moments in our lives, like it's weird how we can just never forget them. Like, we can forget so many things even today alone, I was going through like stats and figures and stuff that doesn't really matter in terms of this show, but like I probably forgot about 6 to 10 of those things. But those moments in our lives, they just hit you, and they just almost never seem to go away. They might fade a little bit, and some of the details might get a little hazy, but those are the things that stick with you because they're so impactful. And I think, especially for those of us who appreciate every day that we're here on this earth, like it adds that extra layer, because every moment is precious, essentially. Whether I'm on a plane, because we just came back from Seattle. So yeah, here I go back with Seattle again. So I could tell like all the little details. They put us on basically just like this commuter plane, and we're flying out, and the lady who gets in the seat next to me, because it's only like 2 seats on each side, which was already weird. She, kind of taps me on the shoulder. She's like, "So where are you from?" And then we got a little chatty and stuff. And she was like, "Oh, these planes are super safe. They're actually better than the big ones because they're blah, 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 the more aerodynamic or something like that. I just came from Alaska on one of these. They're so great." And we were flying on Alaska, and I could not have been more freaked out of my mind on this flight. I think it was because it was so small. I mean, we weren't like on a ship where we were getting tossed back and forth everywhere, but the turbulence, I swear I could feel it so much more. And what was weirder too is as we were flying around, they're pushing us, or they're telling us to go into open areas, and I don't know if that's for like plane balancing or what it is, but yeah, they were just like, okay, everyone go into each row. We want to space everybody out. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, like I didn't know what that really meant. So like the lady was sitting next to me telling me her Alaska stories. Super nice lady, by the way. She goes into another seat, and I just think to myself, I'm like, that's weird. Okay. To make me any more paranoid, I decided to go up to the bathroom, and then there was this kind of younger couple, maybe around the same age as you and I. But he's got on, big muscle out dude with camo shorts, and she's like kind of skinny, tiny, rose colored pattern on her clothes or whatever, and like this tiny little thing. And when I came back, they were just gone, and I couldn't see them. I didn't know where they were. I was like, what is happening on this flight? And I genuinely thought that maybe something had happened, like, like the rapture had come or something, and they had just been like zipped up out of their seat. I don't know. But it was weird because I came back and I was already scared enough as it is. I think, the flight ends and all that stuff, and they must have been moved all the way up into first class or something like that because they had probably asked. But they showed up at the very end, and I just thought it was really weird. But throughout that whole flight, we're getting tossed around every which, or I shouldn't say tossed around, but shaken up in our cabin. And I was just genuinely concerned because I didn't think that was going to be such a messy flight. And then they called over the intercom, and then they're like, hey, everyone, turbulence is really bad. And we're like, we know. So we're going to direct you guys off, instead of going to San Francisco, off to Oakland. So they actually took us off to Oakland. And I'm just like, ugh. I mean, I got nothing against Oakland personally, but I've been to Detroit, and going to Oakland, at least the area we were in, because we were just there before our flight took off. We went to an Oakland A's game, which I love the arena, stadium, whatever you want to call it, but that whole area that surrounds it reminded me so much of Detroit. So I just thought that was going to be another like weird close call. Maybe I'm just growing paranoid in my old age. I don't know. But the truth of the matter is I'm just thankful that things tend to work out better than you'd expect them to. Do you have any other ones that come to mind? Close calls that you might have had?
Not really. Like every flight that I've been on has been relatively easy. Like I've never experienced any like terrible turbulence.
Yeah.
Even flying over to the Netherlands, I didn't experience any.
I didn't know you did that. That's cool.
At all. Yeah.
Okay. How long ago was that?
Oh God, it was like 2 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah. I never got involved in like a serious car accident, like kind of what you were saying. I did get rear-ended one time, and it wasn't the worst thing in the world. It bent the hell out of my front end. It never showed up on like an insurance report, thankfully, because it was to do with the rain, and then the guy drove off, and it was kind of a shitty thing. But my brother, though, one of the weirdest cases I've ever heard, and I'm thankful, like, despite the fact that he and I butt heads a lot, the fact that he's still with us today, because I don't know how this happened, but I feel like this one should be worth sharing. So he was being a stupid 16-year-old kid. I think he was 16 or maybe 17 at the time. And he had this option. It was called like a turbo booster on his little white beater car. I think it was like a Nissan or something from the early 90s. But it had like this turbo boost option. And being a young kid, you think, oh, I got a turbo boost. I'm going to do, all sorts of weird, over the top extreme kind of things with it. So he would take me in his car sometimes, just because I didn't want to drive everywhere. We get in his vehicle, and he'd want to go over the train tracks. And one day he was just trying to do the turbo thing. He flew off, and then he came down, and I was like, dude, you should never do that again, because like I could hear the bottom of his car scraping when he landed, because it wasn't like in the movies, like a Rush Hour kind of thing where like they go over a San Francisco hill and then they come down, and for some reason the car doesn't immediately shatter. But it was, high enough. At least when you're in the car, you could feel like it was like a small roller coaster drop when you landed. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, you should probably not do that. And he was like, I'm going to beat the hell out of this car and it's going to be the coolest thing ever. And like he was having such a good time with it. I think it was maybe a month later, he was still in that mode and having a good time. And he decided on a rainy day to come down this kind of S-shaped hill that went back to our parents' place. And as he's coming down, at least this is the story we've been told, is that he swerved just a little too much and then went down into a ditch, popped up in the air, fell on his hood of his car, and then the car just dragged about a good maybe 100 to 200 feet. And I know, like, stupid Nick, but, you know, it's one of those things that, like, I was genuinely worried that he was going to be dead. Like, the fact that we hadn't heard from him, and then we found out, because someone had seen him in the street and told us, I think was the story. So we get down there, and we see him, and he walks out of the car with just, like, the tiniest of little glass scratches on his shoulder. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt even, and he was just fine. And I was just, like, so thankful that he made it out. I mean, the ironic thing is we had been fighting just days before, but, like, I still love him enough that the fact that he made it through it was just such a thing that I was more relieved than angry at him. So I don't know how or why these things happen the way that they do. You know, obviously the Gilroy shooting, going back to our original point, was very tragic, and, you know, a lot of lives were lost. And then I think the tally came to, I think it was like 13 that were at least wounded or died in the course of the events. And like, obviously my heart goes out to all of them, because I know what it's like to lose someone. I think we all can relate to that on some level. Now, I don't know if anyone in my family has been lost to the events of a shooting per se, but it's definitely something that I think we can all be thankful that we have the ones we do in our lives, and that we're able to live in a world where we can go through situations where people are there to support us and be there for us in times of need. I mean, right now, I would also like to bring up that Gilroy, as silly as it sounds, El Pollo Loco is donating. There's a lot of people who are giving to the cause and trying to help out. I think if you go to the Gilroy Foundation, they set up like a fund to benefit the shooting victims. So if you guys want to reach out to them. And I think before we close this out, I want to also bring up just a little bit of the topic of gun violence. Honestly, Brad, do you think in our lifetime they're ever going to minimize this level of effect that guns seem to have on our society?
Oh,
I know it's a loaded question. I know. I'm sorry.
That is a loaded question.
It really is.
I think if sort of the social culture develops a little bit more and is less stressful, you know, more and more emphasis is placed on careers nowadays. How do I afford this? How do I afford that? And honestly, just taking things too seriously. I think a lot of people get very misconstrued opinions that they take to heart, and I think that's one of the it's one of the few of the core reasons of, you know, any gun-related violence that happened, especially in Gilroy. I don't really recall any specific any motivations from the shooter. I don't know if he was some sort of supremacist or he was just on his last leg and just had an extremely awful day or something. But
you know what's actually interesting is I was following Twitter, as I do, but I was going through, and immediately after the shooting I should say, as soon as I started hearing some of the details, I went on Twitter and I started to see how other people were reacting. And it was interesting how someone was saying, be careful, the media might try and spin this. And I try not to go into all that, like, oh, because, Fox News or MSNBC or any of them start talking about it in some way that they're going to play an angle. But what I tried to do, especially, was listening to like the local news, trying to get the in the moment, on the scene kind of coverage from people who were actually there and the events as they were taking place. Seeing the young people that were just running away just in fear, and then the gunshots. Like, I've been told that this person was just angry. I think there was some sort of rage at the Hispanic culture. I mean, and respectfully so. There is a lot of it around here, especially in Salinas where we live. But I just can't understand the world that we live in, to whether it's a political figure or it's your like party affiliation or your feelings about a certain race or ethnicity, how we let ourselves get to this point where we blame every little thing instead of trying to find solutions. Like, when people are genuinely upset, the fact that we go, there's a thing that happened today. I don't want to bring up specific details about it, but I noticed two sides of this conversation, or this incident, where someone was acting relatively idiotic but still opinionated, and a lot of the internet was kind of trashing that person, and maybe rightly so. That person probably brought it on themselves. But then there's another person who's just laughing at them the whole time. And I thought, why do we stoke the flames? Like, when someone does something of any level of ignorance, the last thing you should be doing is mocking them and pushing them further down the road, because your mocking of them only drives them to want to hate you and the thing that you stand for even more. And I think that's half of the problems that exist in this country with now that I'm trying to get off my little pulpit here, but
get off the soapbox.
I know, right? Like, I don't think I have all the answers, but I just wish that we would look to each other and we would talk to each other and go, like, maybe I don't understand you, but let me try and understand you a little bit, instead of just going, you're different from me, I'm shutting down, and I'm just going to pretend like you're too weird or too different from me to even try and get where you're coming from. I think we have too much of that these days, and I'm sure there are plenty of things that you could point at that go, well, it's so-and-so's fault, but I think it's on all of us to just be better. And that's one of those things I always try and pepper in throughout show to show, is just like, just be better. I mean, obviously, someone might act a little worse. Some gun toting maniac is not small person from Kansas or whatever who's never touched a gun in their life, but everything that we do affects someone in some way. So I think if we just took 2 seconds and tried to just put a little bit more good out into the world, I think things like this would probably be less likely to happen, guns and all. So yeah, I know. So how do you feel after all this? Do you feel like we're ever going to get to a point where just guns are just not an issue?
I think so. I think we're in a period of about a decade or so where we are, I don't want to say overly sensitive, but I think while we're addressing a lot of things that are serious, mental health, just to name one of them.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other things that we take overly seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Just about any comment section on the internet, whether it be Facebook or Reddit or YouTube or
true.
Whatever have you.
Yeah, the internet is just a fun place for all of that stuff. Yeah, and I just don't know what the answer is, because I want to just say, let's just throw all the guns in a big old box and burn them and just get rid of them. But will that stop society from poking and prodding at each other? Well, I mean, I think it will genuinely cut down on the mass death. Like, I think the idea that someone coming at you with a knife is going to be a lot less massively fatal than it would be than to take an AR rifle and just mow people down. But we do need to fix some of these things, and I'm just thankful that we didn't experience a much greater fatality than we did. And I'm so thankful that some people walked away, you know, from the incident unscathed. And I just really hope that we get to a point in my lifetime and yours where this just isn't a conversation that we have to have anymore.
I think,
yeah, go
you
ahead.
know, it's very, I don't know if it might be Switzerland that, I don't know. I think everybody goes through a mandatory how to use a firearm.
Okay. Yeah.
And they have like, I think they have like the least amount of gun violence in the world.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, but on the Australian side, because they apparently got rid of their.
Yeah, they went the opposite direction.
Oh no! I think they. Well, or yeah. You're talking about control, and I'm talking about almost abolishment.
Yeah, instead of keeping weapons and teaching their citizenry how to use them, they merely just went, we're just going to take all of them.
Yeah, and I honestly, I mean, like, and this is me putting my personal stance out there. Like, if I had to make a choice, I think the idea of getting rid of them isn't a bad idea. But I know that, you know, whether it's you're talking Second Amendment rights and all that stuff, there is a feeling of like, you're taking my thing away from me. How am I supposed to live in a free country if you're taking something, like if you were to take a cigarette from someone, like, or say that you can't smoke cigarettes anymore because they're bad for you and they're bad for people around you. I get that. And I understand the feeling of that. Like, my dad goes hunting. Like, he's not going out and committing atrocities. I mean, obviously I would like him to kill less deer, but
that you know of.
God, don't do that to me, man. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Get back on track.
It's okay. But when it comes down to it, though, I think about the fact that some people come at it from a genuine place. Like, there are some people who, and I don't know the full statistics on this, but it was always taught to me growing up, especially as a Wisconsin boy, that to like control some of the deer population, they go out and then they you know, shoot some of them, and some of it's used for food purposes, and it just controls the population so it doesn't get overrun. And I see a positive to that, as minimal as it might be. Like, I mean, who doesn't want to have more deer? But at the same time, I think if we control it in the right way, where we say, like, here is a business purpose utility item, if whatever you want to call it, like your business is run, or your specific profession, whatever you're doing, is using this item for a specific targeted purpose, and that hopefully that purpose is not people, and we'll vet that person properly. But like the idea that like anyone can just go around and get themselves a tiny handgun or whatever. I mean, even like the pea shooters or whatever you want to call them. Like I know, and there's a small argument for the women. Like, I know there are a lot of ones who feel like they should have them to protect themselves. And frankly, that's a hard one, because I don't have the life of a woman. I don't know their struggle from a personal basis. So I can't go and say that this is my hardline stance on that. But at least coming from my perspective, I would think like giving them a taser or something as close to lethal as possible to sedate or put down their attacker would be enough, without trying to actually murder someone. I think the idea that we're just trying to get rid of people so quickly, like I think Trump was saying recently that he wants to reinstate the death penalty, and I don't think that's necessarily the right way to just get rid of things. I believe in trying to fix the problem. I don't believe in just trying to like put it out of its misery and be like, well, if we just keep killing off people, that's a solution, because some people see things that way, and I just don't want it to go that route. Before I get all, long-winded with all this stuff, I think simply put, if we had better checks and balances with everything that we do, whether it's guns or how we monitor various activities in our life, I think we would have a better and more functioning society. But, I can't solve all the problems of the world in one day, and neither can Brad. So like I said, I think it would be great if any of our listeners went and pledged their support to the Gilroy Foundation and all the work that they're doing there to kind of help with the victims of the shooting. I know that there are plenty more of these situations from Columbine all the way to the present. And we had one in El Paso just recently after the events here, which, the sad truth is for a lot of people, it's just another day. And I don't want it to be that, but it's becoming a growing thing that just we're almost expecting it now. And I don't want it to be that way. I want us to fix it. But even if we can't, we can protect those who have been affected by it and help them in their time of need. And even if we can't solve gun violence, we can be there for people who need it most. And that really is the thing that is the best that we can do in this moment. And I just want to say thank you to anyone who reached out. I know this isn't the most over the top in your face. Yeah. Uplifting, kind of like, hey, the cool things are happening. But like sometimes with 30 Minutes of Life, there's a serious moment and it needs to be discussed. And I hope that this isn't completely off-putting because, yes, we'll be back to our normal spiel about random stuff that maybe some people don't even care about. But sometimes like I said, it's cathartic. It helps for people who are hurting. And I hope that the messaging isn't lost on anyone that, these things shouldn't be, and we need to fix it somehow, some way. And I appreciate the fact that we have so much goodwill in this world, despite some of the monsters that exist in it. So, I think that's enough for 30 Minutes of Life this week. Thank you guys for listening. Please impart your thoughts about everything that we said here. I'm sure gun violence and near fatal brushes with death are going to be a controversial thing. And that is definitely not why we do this. Please reach us at any of our social media destinations. I don't know if Brad wants to be emailed on this, but you can always email the show at nerdragepod@gmail.com. You can always find us on Twitter and let us know how you feel about it at the Nerd Rage Pod, or you can tell me I'm wrong directly at Ryans_ramblings. Honestly, thank you guys for listening. You guys know where all of our other social media outlets are, even Facebook and all that stuff. So leave us a message there. Thank you guys for listening. I've been Ryan Anderson.
And I'm Ed Lehrman.
And I'll see you guys again on the next episode.